Few musicians have left as profound of an impact on music and popular culture as Kurt Cobain and Jimi Hendrix. Though they were raised in different eras, their artistry, personal struggles, and untimely tragic deaths left a lasting mark on the world. Besides both being left-handed guitarists and hailed as the greatest rock star of their generation, there are some common themes in their lives, personality, and music. Jimi Hendrix, who as a guitarist and showman mesmerized the world with his technical ability, and Kurt Cobain, who had a simpler, straightforward approach, utilizing melodies and hooks, both managed to entertain and inspire music lovers and musicians decades after their passing. In this video, I will also explore the significant parallels in not only their musical contributions, but also in their lives. Their life's careers and the cultural revolutions surrounding them have some similarities that continue to resonate with the wide audience decades after their passing. We will take a look at their influences, the cultural and musical revolutions they led, their unique approaches to their instruments, their struggles with fame, and the personal battles which ultimately led to their tragic demise. Though Cobain and Hendrix grew up at different times, they were both from the state of Washington. Kurt Cobain in the small town of Aberdeen, Washington, and Hendrix in Seattle, Washington. Their early lives were marked by a deep love for music, shaped by an emotionally turbulent childhood. Both of them at times were raised in unstable environments. Jimi Hendrix was born in 1942, raised in a poor family, and spent his early years moving between family members and sometimes random people. His father, Al Hendrix, was often absent due to military service during World War II. His mother was unstable and struggled with alcoholism, and his parents eventually divorced when he was 9 years old. Jimi Hendrix found comfort in music, first teaching himself to play guitar and then submerging himself in the blues, R&B, and rock and roll. His early experiences with instability and hardship gave his music an emotional intensity that resonated with audiences. Jimi Hendrix was heavily influenced by the blues and R&B music he heard as a kid. His father often played him blues records, and he became fascinated by guitarists like Muddy Waters and Elmore James. Hendrix also idolized early rock and roll pioneers like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, who displayed high-energy performances and cutting-edge showmanship. Kurt Cobain's childhood, though occurring decades later, echoed many of the same conflicts. Born in 1967, Cobain's parents also divorced when he was 9 years old, an event that he later described as a pivotal moment of trauma. Prior to this event, he described his childhood as normal and happy. He was an energetic and artistic child who loved drawing, music, and performing for others. After the divorce, Cobain initially lived with his father, Donald Cobain, for a time. His father could be very harsh to him at times, stating in an interview that his father would sometimes overreact and assault him for simply spilling a drink. Kurt later moved back with his mother Wendy, who at one time stayed in a physically abusive relationship, which Kurt witnessed and further strained their relationship. He too retreated into music, especially toward punk rock and discovering bands like the Melvins, a local underground band which he personally knew. Kurt Cobain grew up listening to a wide variety of music, from classic rock bands like Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, and the Beatles, to punk rock bands like Black Flag and the Sex Pistols. Punk rock had a large influence on Cobain's music, with its do-it-yourself ideology and raw, unpolished sound. His music combined the simplicity and aggression of punk with the melodic characteristics of pop and classic rock. He has said that trends will come and go, but everything will revert back to melody because that is what's most pleasing to the ear. I've never been one to read too much into lyrics, but it seems to me both Cobain and Hendrix saw music as a form of personal expression and escape, channeling their difficult upbringings and life struggles into their art. As a young black man playing rock guitar in the 1960s, Hendrix was a rarity. Rock was predominantly seen as a white genre, and he faced racism and criticism from both white and black audiences. Despite his immense talent, he struggled to find success. Kurt Cobain also felt like an outsider within his hometown of Aberdeen, which was a conservative, blue-collar logging town that didn't embrace his artistic interests. He was often seen as an outcast. This often left him feeling isolated. Whether it was intentional or not, both Hendrix and Cobain played starring roles in the cultural revolutions of their respective eras, which elevated their status of mere musicians to become symbols of either a new popular subgenre in music or social movements. Jimi Hendrix came on the scene in the mid-1960s at the height of the hippie movement. He had been a studio and backing band musician for years before fronting the Jimi Hendrix Experience for artists like Little Richard, the Isley Brothers, and even with Ike and Tina Turner for a brief period. His experimental approach to guitar playing and his unusual performance style, complete with playing behind his back and setting his guitar on fire, embodied the spirit of rebellion and freedom. He broke racial and musical boundaries, fusing blues, rock, and jazz into a sound that was unique. Hendrix, with his flamboyant style and carefree attitude, embodied the nonconformity of the hippie movement. He rejected traditional societal expectations around race, gender, and identity, symbolizing individuality and self-expression. Kurt Cobain's rise to fame in the early 1990s brought a revolutionary shift in rock music. Almost overnight, the dominance of 1980s hair and glam metal gave way to the grunge and alternative movement. This marked a turning point as grunge resonated more deeply with the youth. The glam metal scene, with its superficial lyrics about excess, money, and sex, began to feel outdated to Generation X. Kurt combined the heaviness of metal with the simplicity of emotion and punk. His lyrics sometimes contained themes of alienation, depression, and frustration. Kurt's songs usually had a hook and at times seemingly random poetry. Sometimes the lyrics were even written hours before the songs were recorded. Hendrix and Cobain were both innovative musicians. Each in their own way had a unique style of playing, and they mostly played in a three-piece power trio format. Although Nirvana did have rhythm guitarists Jason Everman and Pat Smear for relatively short periods. Hendrix is often hailed as one of the most influential guitarists of all time, not just because of his technicality with leads, but also because of the way he revolutionized the instrument's role in rock music. Hendrix was one of the early artists to utilize effects like fuzz, feedback, and even a wah pedal to enhance his songs. His use of feedback in particular was groundbreaking and without a doubt influenced guitarists for decades to come, including Kurt Cobain, who incorporated that to be a large part of his sound. Jimi Hendrix often used his thumb to fret the lower notes on the neck, which freed his fingers up to play chords, bass lines, and melodies at the same time. This attributed to his unique sound and allowed more dynamic interplay between bass and treble notes, pretty much allowing him to be both a lead and rhythm guitarist at the same time. In songs like Little Wing and The Wind Cries Mary, he would often play rhythm chords with melodic fills in between. Cobain, though obviously not a virtuoso, had a distinct playing style. Where Hendrix pushed the boundaries of the guitar's sonic possibilities through technical mastery, Cobain was admittedly more of a songwriter than an instrumentalist and favored simple melodies usually played on one string backed by simple chord progressions. He had a unique way of fingering power chords with just two fingers, using the index and ring, and for some with just the index finger. This technique often led to incidental notes ringing out on the higher strings. Particularly on the first album, Bleach, he was a riff master on the low strings and used a ton of vibrato. He used vibrato as a means to accentuate certain notes. His solos were often based on basic melodies, often the vocal melody, to enhance these simple lines, making them feel more dynamic and expressive. His songs often alternated between soft, clean verses and loud, distorted, in-your-face choruses, creating a stark contrast. While bands like the Pixies had utilized this prior to Nirvana, Nirvana was one of the bands that popularized it. Both Cobain and Hendrix are known for often playing Fender guitars. Hendrix more so for his Stratocaster use, although at times he did use offsets like a Jaguar or a Jazzmaster. Cobain, on the other hand, favored Fender offsets, especially the Mustang and his Jaguar, but he also played a good amount of Strats as well. Perhaps the most famous is his Vandalism Fender Strat, but there were plenty more Strats that he used either to record with or the ones that he bashed up after the shows. Both of them have their own signature Fender guitars, Hendrix a Strat, and Kurt Cobain, which has had 3 signature guitars, the Jaguar, the Mustang, and his own creation, the Jagstang. Hendrix was also known to play Gibson Les Pauls, SGs, and Flying Vs from time to time, and of course Kurt loved the Univox High Flyer copies. Fame came to both Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain relatively quickly, and neither could have prepared for the pressures that it brought. While they both crave success, they both find the reality of fame isolating and at times overwhelming. Jimi Hendrix became a superstar after his iconic 1967 Monterey Pop Festival performance, where he famously set his guitar on fire. Thrust into the spotlight, he struggled with the expectations as a cultural icon. He spoke openly about the impact of music on consciousness and the way he sought to express emotion and otherworldly experiences through sound. But the media often portrayed these ideas as being purely the result of his drug use rather than his artistic vision. Kurt Cobain struggled with fame after Nevermind catapulted Nirvana to stardom. He disliked being labeled as a generational spokesperson and resented how the media and fans misinterpreted his music and lyrics. Cobain grew frustrated with repetitive questions and felt the media often misrepresented his views and personality. Their fame was both a blessing and a curse, providing them with a platform to share their art but also accelerated their personal struggles. Tragically, both Kurt Cobain and Jimi Hendrix struggled with personal demons that would ultimately lead to their untimely deaths. Their battles with substance abuse, mental health, and the pressures of fame would contribute to their downfall. Both men part of the notorious 27 Club, as they both unfortunately died at the age of 27. Jimi Hendrix had a well-documented history of substance abuse, particularly with marijuana, LSD, and alcohol. As his fame grew, so did his dependency on these substances, with the physical and emotional demands of frequent touring. In September of 1970, Hendrix was found dead in London from asphyxiation, having choked on his own vomit after consuming a large amount of sleeping pills which were barbiturates. Similarly, Kurt Cobain struggled with addictions, particularly heroin, which became a major issue in the early 1990s for him. Cobain's heroin use was often a way to self-medicate his physical pain due to suffering from chronic stomach issues. Despite a few attempts at rehab and intervention, Cobain's drug use continued to spiral out of control. In April 1994, just after 20 years after Hendrix's death, Cobain allegedly took his own life at the age of 27, joining the same tragic 27 Club. Both deaths were seen as tragic and avoidable. Like Kurt Cobain's death, Jimi Hendrix's death has been surrounded with controversy and inconsistencies in the manner and circumstances. I don't wish to speak about those in this video, but I'll leave it at that and you can look into that stuff on your own. You can draw your own conclusions. Though Hendrix and Cobain's lives were tragically cut short, their influence on music, culture, and musicians has endured long after their deaths. Jimi Hendrix is still regarded as one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and Kurt Cobain is one of the greatest songwriters of all time. They both have inspired and will continue to inspire millions of young guitarists long after all of us are gone. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. Check out some of my other videos and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one.